I used to think the night before your wedding was supposed to feel magical, like the universe hit pause so you could soak up the calm before your forever started. Mine began with a text that detonated the calm completely. He's marrying you for revenge. At first I laughed. It had to be spam, right? I was standing in my hotel suite surrounded by satin chaos, my gown draped over a chair, half-packed honeymoon suitcases by the bed, my best friend Lila swearing at a stubborn eyelash curler, and my phone decides to play Saw. Probably a wrong number, Lila said without looking up. Or your ex finally joined the drama club circuit. But the longer I stared at that message, the heavier it felt. My stomach tightened the way it does before a storm. The number was blocked. No name, no history. Just that sentence, sitting there like a curse. When I showed it to Evan an hour later, he didn't even blink. He smiled that courtroom smooth smile of his, the one that could sell you the rope and the reason to hang yourself, and said, "Babe, it's a prank. People do this to mess with brides all the time. Ignore it. Someone found my private number," I said. "That's not a random prank." Evan's hand slid around my waist. "You've been under stress. Don't let nonsense ruin tomorrow." He kissed my forehead and walked out to take a call. I heard him in the hallway, voice low, clipped. Too low for a business thing, too sharp for calm. When I stepped out, he'd already ended it. Lila leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "You realize gaslighting looks a lot like reassurance when it's done in a nice suit, right?" I shot her a look. "He's not like that." "Maybe," she said. "But if my man ever told me I was just stressed after a text like that, I'd be stress testing his car tires with a kitchen knife." We laughed, but it felt hollow. Later, while she slept, I scrolled through my contacts, searching for who could have sent it. No hits. My thumb hovered over the sender's number. Something about it nagged at me. I copied it into a search bar. Cross. That was the registered last name. Evan's last name. The air left my lungs. It had to be a coincidence, right? The world had millions of crosses. But coincidences don't show up the night before you promise forever. I stared at my reflection in the window, the city lights flickering behind me. My engagement ring catching the glow. It suddenly looked less like a promise and more like a contract I hadn't read carefully enough. Now, I ain't no detective, but when your future husband's family name shows up in an anonymous warning, that ain't a red flag. It's a whole marching band spelling out "run" on the 50-yard line. Anyway, back to the mess. The next morning's rehearsal felt like a scene from someone else's life. Evan was flawless. Calm, charming, the kind of man who looked like the word trustworthy was tattooed on his cufflinks. Everyone adored him. I tried to match his composure, but every time he looked at me, my brain replayed that text. "He's marrying you for revenge." Lila caught my eye across the aisle. She mouthed, "You okay?" I smiled, the kind that hides everything. But when Evan whispered, "You have nothing to worry about," his tone wasn't comfort. It was command. And that was the moment I realized love can sound a lot like control when you stop believing the harmony. Tomorrow I'd marry him, or so I thought. That night, unable to sleep, I checked the number again. The registration info had changed, erased. Except for one note in the metadata, Dean Cross, Charleston, South Carolina. My ex's name, and the brother I didn't know Evan had. The morning of my wedding felt like standing inside a snow globe someone kept shaking. Everything looked beautiful from the outside. Flawless hair, champagne glasses clinking, nervous laughter echoing through the suite. But inside, I was spinning. Evan was already downstairs, greeting vendors, smiling like the world existed solely to applaud him. He was the kind of man who made everyone feel lucky just to be in his orbit. But after last night's message, "He's marrying you for revenge," that charm felt like a performance I couldn't unsee. I told myself it was nerves. Every bride gets anxious, but my chest wouldn't unclench. The morning slipped by in a blur of makeup brushes and curling irons until the florist arrived, carrying a bouquet that wasn't mine. Roses, not lilies. White instead of blush. A harmless mistake, except Evan had personally confirmed those flowers 3 times. He hated lilies. I loved them. The change wasn't random. It was control disguised as taste. When he came up to check on me, I was staring at that bouquet like it might confess something. "Something wrong?" he asked. "Who changed the flowers?" He blinked just once before smiling. "They must have mixed the orders. You look incredible, by the way." He leaned in to kiss me, but I turned slightly. His lips brushed my cheek. The space between us filled with polite tension, the kind you pretend not to notice in public. Then came the delivery. A young man appeared at the door holding a small white envelope. "For the bride," he said, almost apologetically. Evan took it before I could. "It's probably from your aunt," but my name was written in slanted handwriting I recognized immediately. Dean. My stomach dropped. I snatched the envelope and tore it open. Inside was one line: "You deserve to know the truth before you say I do." My throat went dry. "Dean Cross," I said slowly. "You know him?" Evan's jaw flexed. "He's my brother," he said. The words smooth, practiced, empty. "And he's not someone you should take seriously." I stared at him. "You never told me you had a brother. It's complicated." He reached for my hand. "He's made mistakes. I didn't want to drag that into our life." My heartbeat thundered in my ears. He wasn't lying. That was the problem. He was too good at sounding like he wasn't. Lila, my maid of honor, caught the tension when she walked in. "Did I miss a fight, or just the rehearsal?" she asked, scanning our faces. I forced a laugh. "Just nerves." Evan kissed my forehead. "Exactly. I'll see you at the altar." He left, leaving behind that quiet heaviness that settles when the truth has just been folded into silence. As the suite door closed, I sank into a chair. Lila crouched beside me. "What's going on?" I showed her the note. Her eyes widened. "Dean Cross? You're Dean?" "Yes," I whispered, "and apparently my fiancé's brother." The room tilted. How could I have spent 2 years with someone and never learned that? How did he hide something that big so easily? Every conversation, every story he'd ever told me began replaying in my mind. Edited scenes that didn't line up anymore. Lila's voice softened. "Do you think he's using you?" "I don't know," I said, "but I think I'm about to find out." I thought about calling Dean, demanding answers, but I couldn't even trust my own judgment. What if they were both lying? What if I was just the middle piece of some unfinished revenge? I'd built my life around planning perfect weddings, every detail flawless, every moment orchestrated. Now I was standing in the middle of my own, realizing I might be nothing more than part of someone else's design. That night, as the last guests left the rehearsal dinner, a security guard approached me in the dim light of the courtyard. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "there's a man outside the gates asking for you. He says his name's Dean Cross, and that you shouldn't marry him." My heart stopped mid-beat. The note hadn't been a warning. It was a beginning. The night air outside the venue felt heavier than it should. Maybe it was the humidity, or the weight of everything I was about to learn. Dean Cross stood just beyond the gates under a street lamp, hands in his pockets, the same quiet confidence I remembered from 3 years ago. Only now, his eyes carried something sharper. "Hey, Nora!" Just hearing my name and his voice made my stomach twist. He was the first man who ever made me believe in forever, and the first to prove how fragile that word really was. "You shouldn't be here," I said, though part of me was relieved to see him. He smiled faintly. "You shouldn't be marrying my brother." The ground seemed to tilt. "You're lying," he shook his head. "I wish I was." He reached into his jacket and handed me a folded letter and 2 photos. One was a screenshot of Evan's messages with him. The other, my engagement announcement on social media, forwarded from Evan to Dean with a single line beneath it. "Let's see how it feels when the roles reverse." My throat went dry. "You knew?" "I didn't. Not at first," Dean said. "When he introduced himself to you, I thought it was coincidence. Then I saw the dates, the timing, the way he used everything I ever told him about you. He wasn't looking for love, Nora. He was looking for payback." "Payback for what?" I wanted to ask. But I already knew. The breakup. The public one. The one that made Dean's career implode after his record deal fell apart because I refused to keep pretending everything was fine. I'd walked away. He'd disappeared. And apparently Evan had been waiting in the shadows ever since. He wanted to ruin me, Dean said quietly. And you were the easiest way to do it. I couldn't breathe. You expect me to believe this? Dean didn't argue. He just looked at me like someone who'd already lost. You don't have to believe me. Just ask him why his proposal happened on the same date I was supposed to propose to you. That hit like a punch. Now, I ain't saying love is dead, but if two brothers are scheduling proposals like dueling calendar events, somebody's family tree needs pruning. Anyway, back to the disaster. I drove home alone, still in my rehearsal dress, veil stuffed into the passenger seat like a ghost that wouldn't shut up. My phone buzzed, Evan calling, but I couldn't answer. By the time I reached my apartment, anger had started boiling beneath the fear. I poured a glass of wine, scrolled through old photos, and realized Dean was right. Evan had mirrored everything. The way he joked. The same spot where Dean first kissed me. Even the same song playing when he proposed. Every memory I thought was ours wasn't ours at all. It was stolen. The next morning I confronted him. He was sitting on the balcony, sipping coffee, calm as ever. "Rough night?" he asked, as if we were talking about the weather. I saw Dean. He didn't flinch. "I figured he'd find you." "Find me?" I repeated. "You made sure he would, didn't you?" He sighed, setting the cup down like this was some tedious meeting he wanted to end. He ruined everything. My family's name, my parents' trust. You humiliated him, and he humiliated us. So yes, I wanted him to feel it. "And me?" I whispered. "What did you want me to feel?" His eyes softened, and that almost made it worse. At first, guilt, then something else. The silence that followed was unbearable. I could hear my pulse in my ears, every beat spelling run. I stood there, wedding ring glinting in the morning light, wondering how many lies could fit inside the word love before it lost its meaning. Before I could respond, his phone buzzed. A message from Dean flashed across the screen. "If you go through with it, I'll tell her everything. On camera." Evan met my eyes. "I guess now you'll see who's really telling the truth." And in that moment, I realized the wedding wasn't about vows anymore. It was a countdown. By sunrise, Charleston felt too bright for what was about to happen. The sky was spotless, the air thick with salt and expectation. Somewhere below my balcony, a string quartet was rehearsing Can't Help Falling in Love. The irony nearly made me laugh. I'd barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw both brothers, one looking guilty, the other proud of it. I told myself I'd confront Evan again, demand answers, demand honesty. But honesty doesn't exist between people who build a relationship out of borrowed pain. When I walked into the bridal suite, everyone gasped like I'd appeared from a fairy tale. My mother started to cry. Lila handed me coffee and whispered, "Last chance, Nora. You sure about this?" I wasn't. But sometimes we walk toward the altar, not because we're certain, it's because we can't stand the humiliation of walking away. The ceremony began late. The guests murmured. The photographers adjusted their lenses, and Evan, of course, looked immaculate. His eyes met mine across the aisle. Steady. Unreadable. I thought about every story he'd told me about his family, about growing up an only child. Lies spoken so casually, they sounded like memories. I took one step forward, then another. The aisle felt longer than it had yesterday, stretching into something endless and impossible. My bouquet trembled in my hands. When I reached him, Evan smiled, perfect and practiced. "You look stunning," he murmured. "So do you," I said, though my throat felt like glass. The officiant began the vows. My voice wavered once, twice before I caught myself. I looked out over the crowd, rows of friends, co-workers, people who thought they were witnessing love. And then, movement near the back. Someone standing in the shadows. Dean. He was pale but determined, holding a small black box. Not a ring box. A USB drive. The officiant asked the question that always sounds like a trap. Does anyone here have reason this couple should not be joined in marriage? Dean stepped forward. I do. Gasps rippled through the crowd like shockwaves. The officiant froze. Evan's jaw locked, and he whispered, Don't. But Dean kept walking, past my mother's gasp, past the guests lifting their phones, until he was close enough that I could see the faint scar on his temple, one I used to trace with my fingers. He handed the USB to the officiant. Play it. No one moved for a moment. Then, someone connected it to the projector. The screen behind us lit up with messages, emails, Evan's name, my name, Dean's name. She'll never see it coming. Poetic justice. I'll propose on the date you were supposed to. Watch me. Each line hit like a gunshot. People whispered. Some audibly gasped. Lila's hand covered her mouth. My mother started crying again, but for an entirely different reason. Evan turned toward me, desperate now. Nora, it's not what it looks like. It looks like you built a marriage proposal out of revenge. I did, but it changed. I fell for you. Stop, I said. Don't ruin what little truth is left. My voice shook, but not from weakness, from the clarity that only comes when everything breaks. The officiant cleared his throat, awkwardly. Should we continue? I looked around. Flowers, champagne, dresses, cameras. All of it felt absurd. No, I said quietly. We're done here. I turned and walked down the same aisle I'd entered, veil dragging like a shadow behind me. No one followed. Not even Lila. The world had gone silent except for the soft click of heels and the sound of my heart slowing to something steady. I always thought betrayal came like thunder. Loud, explosive, impossible to miss, but it's quieter than that. It comes in practiced smiles, in well-timed kisses, in stories told just to see if you'll believe them. By the time I reached the courtyard, the wind had picked up. I stood there in my wedding dress, watching the petals swirl across the pavement, and realized I didn't feel broken. I felt awake. Hours later, as I packed my things in silence, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. I never planned to fall for you, but I did. E. For a moment, I almost believed him again. Then I deleted it. 3 weeks after the almost wedding, the dress was back in its box, and my phone had stopped vibrating with sympathy texts from people who only ever liked my photos. Charleston moved on. Seagulls still heckled tourists on the pier. Brides still posed under live oaks. The world didn't collapse because I refused to say I do. It just clicked back into place without the lie. Evan tried calling at first, then emails, then the long, bleeding paragraphs no one writes unless they're terrified of silence. He wanted to meet for closure. That word used to tempt me. Not anymore. Closure is just control in nicer clothes. Instead, I met Lila at our usual coffee shop. The same one where Evan accidentally found me 2 years ago, because I wanted to rewrite the geography of my life. She pushed a mic across the table like a ring box. You said you wanted your voice back, she said. Let's make it loud. We recorded the first episode on her laptop. No plan except honesty. I titled it, He Said It Was Love. It was strategy. I told the story from the beginning, how a text the night before my wedding saved me from signing a contract built out of somebody else's war. I kept names vague, facts sharp, feelings sharper. When we uploaded it, I expected 50 listens. By sunrise, we had 50,000. Women wrote to me from everywhere. College dorms, cul-de-sacs, corner offices. Their messages sounded like my reflection. I thought I was crazy. He kept saying I was overreacting. Thank you for saying it out loud. I didn't feel like a victim reading them. I felt like a locksmith. The brothers did what brothers do when pride is a fragile religion. They escalated. Dean posted receipts, then deleted them. Evan hired a PR firm that specialized in reputation resilience, which is what you call cleaning smoke stains after you set your own house on fire. Their mother sent me a softer apology than her sons deserved. We raised them to win. We forgot to teach them how to lose. I didn't respond. Not because I was cruel, because I was done. A producer reached out after episode 3. Did I want to host a series about emotional manipulation and the stories we tell ourselves to survive it? Yes. God, yes. We turned my planner brain into a show calendar. Red flags in polite disguise, apologies that aren't, when love sounds like a contract. Every week, more voices. Every week, less shame. One afternoon, I walked past the waterfront lawn, where I almost promised forever. Another ceremony was underway. Flowers catching sunlight, a father practicing his stoic smile. I stood at the fence a minute longer than I meant to, wondering if I'd ever want vows again. Then I realized I already had them. I'd just made them to myself. I promised never to confuse charisma for character. I promised to stop negotiating with red flags like they were coupons. I promised to treat my intuition like a smoke alarm, not a playlist. The promises stuck. Now, I ain't saying the best revenge is success, but if your ex's PR team has a Google alert on your podcast while you're booking sponsors, go ahead and add a little caramel drizzle to that victory latte. Anyway, back to the regularly scheduled healing. Evan asked for one last conversation. No ambush, no cameras, just us. Against my better judgment, I agreed. Public cafe, daylight, 10-minute limit, Lila at the next table pretending to be fascinated by a muffin. He looked smaller out of a suit. Not physically, spiritually. I loved you, he said, eyes glassy. I swear I did. You loved the leverage, I said. And when it turned into love, you didn't stop the plan. That's not romance. It's cowardice. He swallowed. I wanted him to feel what I felt watching you walk away from him. And now you get to feel what I felt watching you pretend, I said, standing. We're even. He reached for my hand. I didn't move. He let it drop. 10 minutes exactly. I left to the sound of my own shoes on tile, and Lila whisper cheering under her breath like a proud stage mom. That night, I recorded our finale for season 1. I didn't name the brothers. I didn't need to. I named the pattern. I named the places I gave away pieces of myself for the comfort of a story that looked good in photos. I ended with a truth that tasted like cold water. I didn't dodge a bullet. I watched the shooter put the gun down and chose not to hand it back. I slept through till morning for the first time in months. By the time the sun hit the harbor, the show had climbed again. Sponsorships, speaking invites. The dress stayed boxed. My life did not. Love is a choice, not an alibi. If someone builds a future on your humiliation, they aren't your partner. They're your publicist. Walk away before the credits roll, even if you already paid for the venue. What would you have done if you learned your fiancé was your ex's brother and the wedding was a weapon? Drop your take in the comments. And if this hit a nerve or saved you from a disaster, subscribe for more real stories, real red flags, and the strength to say no before the music starts.